Well, I can see we're already well into our discussion, but to finally pull the population into perspective and then invite Brad and um, Brian and Tom to come up to the front. We have Stan Becker, and Stan and I, when we were brainstorming about this after talking to Tom, felt that uh, we wanted to get a demographer, population person from outside to kind of introduce a little bit of hybrid vigor. And I won't bore you with the details of how many people that Stan tried to persuade to come and participate in this discussion and debate. But it seems as though the demographers have also been frightened into silence on these third rail issues. So we turn to our own Stan, who's never been shy about saying anything about controversy. So Stan, it's all yours.
Okay, it's white on black there. Look at that. Okay, so I'm to enliven the discussion, which is pretty lively already, but to get us to think outside the box. See if that works there. No? Oh, look at that. Okay, even if it's not politically correct, and that's one of the things that keeps, as Bob said, we tried about 15 different people who might speak on it, but demographers are like other scientists. They're in their little silos and do what they get funding for, and it's hard to get funding for interdisciplinary research, and that's one of our reasons. And then the other thing is to talk to people once we go out of here about what we can do. So a couple things to consider. We're one of the few countries in the world that doesn't have an explicit population policy. Most countries of the world are concerned about population growth. We had a population commission back in the 70s, I believe it was, and it never came into a policy that the country has. On the other hand, we're also the fastest growing high-income country in the world. Our rate of increase, about 1%, as I think somebody said, and natural increase, so that's births minus deaths per thousand, is about 0.6%. While that of Europe is 0%, for example. So we have a large natural growth rate, irrespective of immigration. We have many more births than deaths in this country, I'll show in a minute. And we're going to come back to tragedy of the commons, I think. Okay, so here's the... oh, Bob, is this the one you did? I got my own here somewhere. I got a couple more slides I want to show. Anyway, is that, you know where it is? Okay. It'll be black on white.
I think...
Huh? Yeah, but I added a couple during the break. Okay, here we are. Okay. Okay, because I thought we needed a teeny bit of education. So let me step back and this is I'm a teacher, so what is the sustainable population growth rate? Raise your hand if you know the answer. What is the sustainable population growth rate? I want to see every hand in the room here. Come on. What is the sustainable? There's only one number. So a number. Okay, right here in the front. Zero, thank you. We forget that sometimes. We talked about growth. The only sustainable population growth rate in the long term is zero. Educate your family, your everybody about that, because if we look historically here, we're at a unique time in history. The population growth rate for the world peaked at about 2% around 1970 or so, and it's on its way down. It's 1.2%, 1.1% now. We got to come down to zero because we live on a finite planet. Let's get all the basics there. And the question is how it comes down to zero. But it has to come down to zero. So let's not talk about growth. We have to get to zero growth. And here's U.S. population over time. We reached 300 million a few years ago. And the Census Bureau is saying we're going to reach 400 million before 2050 because of we've got higher fertility than we thought we might. And a part of that's due to our immigration, i.e. Latinos have higher fertility. Just to bring it locally, here's Howard County in 1950 had about 25,000 people, and now they have close to 250,000, a tenfold growth in just that time period in our county next door. Here's the number of farms was 1,000, now it's 300 some, and there's your population, 23,000 in 1950 and 220 some thousand now. So we've got tremendous growth, as everybody has said, right in our own area, and I hope I get where Bob's the one that got changed is here, I hope, Bob. So here's what we said before. We have to think outside the box. Consider that our population, we don't have a population policy. What's the matter with us? If you're in the rest of the world, okay, this differs a little bit from what Tom said. These are not so recent statistics, doesn't incorporate the Pew. But if we think about it, how much of our growth is due to immigration? Well, if you're a Native American, it's 99.9%, right? So, I mean, let's be honest about this, because if you're born in this country, you're not an immigrant, are you? Even if your mother walked across the border from Mexico, that's the way the Constitution is. And so if we don't count them, then here's the statistics. It's about 1 million, and that's a little bit low. I think it's 1.1 or 1.2 million legal per year. And try and estimate this. This will keep demographers busy for quite a while. 400 to 500,000 net undocumented. It could be 1 million who come across, but a lot of people go back. I mean, if these are farm laborers, lots of people. And so the estimate's 400 to 500,000 net undocumented. And I don't use the word illegal because no person is illegal. We're undocumented. And a relatively small number of immigrants, and approximately 4.3 million births each year and 2.4 million deaths. So the difference here is quite a few in itself, isn't it? So we have, as we saw, that growth rate of 0.6%. We still have many more births than deaths in this country. And even though we have close to replacement level fertility because of our age structure is quite young, we have not just immigration, we can also think about our fertility. And so here's a few things we can do. We can make contraception easily accessible socially, physically, and economically. Let me say something about this. I speak to different groups. I went up to the Friends School, Quaker Religion, and Johns Hopkins meeting. Anyway, so I spoke at a Friends School in Philadelphia, and I was going by the nursing station. I said, "Oh, do you have condoms available?" This is in a high school. "Do you have condoms available if students want them?" So what did the person say? "Oh no, we wouldn't do that. The boys know that they can get them down in the gas station." Now, what message is that sending? To get them in the bathroom, in the men's room, in the gas station. Is that the message we want to send? That's what we're sending, isn't it? So it's not socially and physically and emotionally accessible. So we have a very high teen pregnancy rate in this country. Our teen pregnancy rate is double what it is in Western Europe. Why? Because it's not socially and physically accessible. We need to do something about that. We have the saddest statistic in this country to me is that half of our pregnancies are unintended. Half of our pregnancies are unintended, and about half of those are unwanted. And about 1 million end up in abortions. That is a sad story, isn't it? That is a real sad story. Forget about immigration, just work on that one. Making family planning accessible to our teenagers. We have a far right that thinks you shouldn't have sex until you get married, but people do have sex, and you should protect them, and the Europeans know that. So, sorry, I'm getting on my hobby horse here, but we need to make contraception accessible to those who need it. And this next one after that's make abortion easily accessible. There are how many counties now? It's lots of counties in this country that have no abortion provider. And we make it physically and socially difficult for people to get it. I teach an undergraduate course. We're going to have a debate next week, I think, or week after. Abortion and contraception should be available to minors without parental consent, yes or no? Big debate, a big debate. My father came up to me, we had a population conference in Chicago when I was in college. He came up to me afterwards and said, "Stan, what do you think your sisters ask if she can go on the pill? What do you think we should do?" I said, "Well, gee, Dad, yes. What's the alternative? What's the alternative?" So anyway, Bob, you wanted to say something here. Is this the place? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm sorry, I cut it there. Okay. Here's some other things we can do. We have incentives for childbearing in this country. It's not a lot, but $36.50 on your 1040 form per child exemption. Okay. So we can think about that, because if I have 7, I multiply 7 times that, don't I? We forget the externalities. If I have 7, it does affect your lifestyle and your life. We can make immigration rational, and I mentioned remember the Society of Friends, and we have our ecological group has said the ideal is open borders. The ideal is open borders, but we can't get there with what we've got now. And Europe has it. It seems ideal. And front page of the paper today about the poor Roma that the French don't want, and everybody's complaining about the French and they won't take them and this sort of thing. Well, if we had a world where we had equity and equality, then it wouldn't be a big deal, would it? People wouldn't want to come here. So we've got some problems, and that's what we say. We can spend more to help countries like Mexico develop economically and spend less on wars. And I had this statistic in there about how many billion it is. When you calculate 1 trillion for the Iraq War or something, and you could give $1,000 to every, or $500 to every poor person in the world. Maybe we ought to work on that. Anyway, we can make adoption easier. We could give incentives for couples who have 0 or 1 children. Somehow we have this image of the spoiled child. Bill McKibben wrote that book about maybe 1 that talks about that's not the case. It's actually the reverse. We could give incentives for small electric cars, and I say that because we don't quite know why the baby boom happened, lasted as long as it did in the 50s and up to the early 60s. One idea is that all these conveniences came in with washing machines and dryers and all these things, so women could not spend time doing each diaper. They just throw all the diapers in. And the other thing was the station wagons. Might have encouraged larger families. If we get these electric cars, I know Sam Hopkins has one, it only holds 2 people. It only holds 2 people. So give incentives for that, and people will think about, oh, maybe. Anyway, there are small things that we do in our society that encourage one thing or the other, and we've been on the other side of this. And we can change that stereotype of couples who choose to have children, the idea of selfish. It's selfish if you don't have children. Well, maybe it's selfish if you do have children, in some ways. Because there are a lot of kids out there that need adopting or need fostering and that sort of thing. So we can change our images of what it means to be a fulfilled person. Okay, and remember the tragedy of the commons, and the idea is, again, that there's externalities of my having 7 children. So the tragedy of the commons was, where was it in England in the 17th century, 18th century? If there's a commons where we can all pasture our cattle, then each farmer, each herder has virtually nothing to lose by putting his cows on the commons. And each one says that, and each one does that, and eventually the commons is destroyed. And this is the title of the paper of Garrett Hard in 1968, that we have to think about population this way, that it does what I do if I have 7 children, it does affect other people. And we have to point that out. And the Chinese have got this right in some sense. They have internalized that having 1 child, it came about coercively, but it doesn't have to come about coercively, just like we've internalized ZPG at some level, because if you look at the surveys, they say if you ask women and men how many children they want, it's a big spike at 2. So the ZPG message did get around. And maybe we have to think about 1-child families, and the Chinese have got that. They say if I have 1 child, that's good for China. How many people would say that about it's good for America if I only have 1 child? We don't have that mindset. Anyway, okay, so I've finished up. I thank you, and please do think outside the box.